What I wanted to talk about today is I've been thinking a lot about brick walls, and uh, I came up with this diagram that I was like, this is pretty cool, that shows the kind of things that I do once I hit a brick wall. And for me, brick walls are those moments when you're doing research and you feel like you can't really go any further. Whether that's true or not is a different matter. And there are also moments that you're working away and you're doing searches for your ancestor and you stop getting new results. And so then you get to that moment where you're like, okay, so what do I search for now when nothing is coming up? And I've been dealing a lot with those lately, which is not fun and they're frustrating. But I think that brick walls are actually a really important moment for doing really interesting research, kind of in disguise, and that frustration. So here's like the start of this diagram, and it's kind of the most basic kind of research that you can do in family history is you're researching your direct ancestors. You're going from your grandparents to your great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, all the way until you hit a brick wall. And doing research this kind of way, you're probably going to hit a brick wall sooner rather than later. I don't think you should do research like this. My minimum is researching all of my direct ancestors, all of their siblings, and as many of their descendants as possible, which can keep you pretty busy. But I love the experience of research, and so I just go for it. And when the records are coming easy, it feels really good. Why do I research all of the descendants? Because a lot of people don't, and a lot of people think that you shouldn't. I disagree with them. But one of the reasons that you should research all of the descendants is that oftentimes descendants on other lines of your family tree will say who they're descended from. And it might be that they say, oh, this was my grandparent, and that's the person who you're trying to find. But you can't find them through your particular line. So it kind of skips over that brick wall for you. So this is an example here that is from my own family tree. In the middle there is David Thomas of Olwyn in Lampeter in southwest Wales. He's my 7 times great-grandfather, and I found this article, which is an obituary for Mary Davis here. So Mary Davis, the person who wrote her obituary, said that her mother was Mary from Wernvelig, and she was a descendant of Olwyn. And I was like, that's really cool because that's where my ancestors are from. The article also said that she was a relative of Reverend John Lewis, who was also a descendant of Olwyn. So all of a sudden, at this brick wall for David Thomas, I have other people that I can research that I didn't know about before, and that I certainly didn't find while doing my research as I was normally, going from child to parent to parent to parent. Kathy here says, when I was searching for my great-grandfather, Hoffman, my mom told me about his brother. I searched him and found a major breakthrough. That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes it's just as easy as talking to people, talking to older family members, which is always really exciting. This family tree here, the purpose of it now in my research is that I now have multiple places to start when working on this one brick wall. Technically, I've gone from having one brick wall to having multiple brick walls, but that's okay. Because there's a better chance that I'm going to find something if I'm working on this one couple from multiple different angles. I was actually working on this the other day after I made the first graphic and found that, actually, I'll go back. I found that Mary who the obituary was written about down here, her mother, Mary, is actually the same Mary as is the mother of Reverend John Lewis, and they're just half siblings, which is a really interesting thing because it just goes to show that the people who are writing these records in the past, they don't necessarily know everything. Like, this person knew that Reverend John Lewis was the son of a Mary, and she was connected to Olwen, and that Mary was the daughter of Mary, and she was connected to Olwen. He didn't know that those two Marys were the exact same person, which I found pretty funny. The other thing about researching other descendants in your tree is that who cared for your ancestors when they got old? Because a lot of them didn't have a place to go other than to live with family. So it might be that the sibling of your direct ancestor was caring for their grandmother, or even like a great-grandparent if they lived quite a long time. The other thing that I was thinking about this morning is that who cared for all of the siblings when they were children? Because my 3 times great-grandfather, William Davis, he had a son named Griffith Morgan Davis, and that Griffith Morgan Davis never lived with him on the census. And that's because he spent his whole life living with William's mother's brother, Griffith Morgan, who Griffith Morgan Davis was named after. And he spent his whole life living with his great uncle. And so you want to find all those people. The next place that I go is looking at work. So your ancestors' work. And I like to, well, I haven't done this very much, but I'm getting more in the habit of it, of looking at like the general social history. Like, if they were working in a factory, what was that kind of life actually like? Or if they were a carpenter, or if they were a farm laborer, what would their daily experiences have been? That's a great way to use this like general historical knowledge to enrich the stories that you can tell about your ancestors. And that kind of goes for any of these categories that we talk about today, is using general history to enrich them really helps. Tradespeople are also really great because they needed to learn their trade from someone. And a lot of this is like skilled, specialized work. So who they learned from was pretty important. So whenever I come across tradespeople, I ask myself, who trained this person? Where did they learn their skill from? And one of my parts of my family that I've talked a lot about on this channel is there's a group of blacksmiths and carpenters. So blacksmiths in pink, carpenters in purple here. Evan David up at the top, he was a pretty prominent blacksmith in his community, and 3 of his sons became blacksmiths after him. Then his grandsons, through his son Jacob, 2 of them became blacksmiths and 1 became a carpenter. The one who became a carpenter learned from his mother's brother. And so if William Davis down here learned carpentry from Griffith Morgan, we can kind of use that experience and ask if it's like a universal experience. So if I was to ask it about Evan David here, I would say, did Evan David learn from one of his family members how to become a blacksmith? And also you can look at Evan David and his 3 sons who became blacksmiths and say, okay, did multiple of Evan David's brothers become blacksmiths also? Or did Griffith Morgan, was one of his, were multiple of his uncles carpenters? And then you can actually go and do research on all of the blacksmiths and carpenters in the community that you're researching, which is something that I have started for this part of my family. For the blacksmiths, I've been saving records about every blacksmith that I come across in whatever kind of record I can find them. Because especially at this time, people were being recorded in the parish registers with their occupation. And yeah, then you have all of this research to do for all of these people who follow the same same form of employment. The next thing that I want to talk about is their friends. So we have all of these records, and so many of them require witnesses. And those witnesses are being witness to important life moments, like marriages, and where else would you need a witness? A will, writing your will. So these are like not small moments. So if you look into those people who show up as witnesses, you'll likely find that they have some kind of family connection. My 6 times great-grandfather, David Davis of Blaenau, he named all of these people in his will. The first 3, or the 3 on the left side, David Lewis Jones, Jenkins Jenkins, and Thomas Jones, were named as his friends in the body of his will. The 2 on the right-hand side, Thomas Davis and John Jones, they were both present for the administration of the will. And so they signed and everything and got the estate organized and everything. Well, when I researched these people, 3 on the left were family members. The 2 on the right were also family members. I'm not going to read this all out to you because I have it plotted as a family tree. So David Davis here in purple, and everyone in green are the people who showed up in the will, either as the administrators or as friends. And so like they're all related and they're all of the same generation. And let me know if you have any thoughts as we're going on. If you've done any of these things yourself for your family history research, I'd love to hear. So coming from that, whose important life events did your ancestor attend? And whose records are your ancestors mentioned in because they were the ones present for those important life moments? That's really important to think about in this way, whose records are your ancestors mentioned in, because when you get to the point where you're making searches specifically for your ancestor and nothing new is showing up, then it's the time when you need to be searching for other people and hoping that your ancestor is mentioned there, which I do a lot of. I also put spouse families in this category because if people are resisting researching their direct ancestors' siblings, then they're definitely not researching the spouses of those siblings. And doing that, especially when your ancestor lived in a small community or they were in some way socially isolated. And so thinking about the Welsh context, I talked about this in my last video about cousin marriage, is that anyone who was a nonconformist, so they were a Methodist or a Baptist or an independent, they were isolated from parts of their community, and so they were marrying within their small community. So when you research your spouse families, you'll often find that there's other connections into your family. So this tree here is the family of Evan Davis and Mary of Pennebank in Cardiganshire. He was a friend of my 7 times great-grandfather. I think he was a witness to his will also. And when I researched it, I researched like 4 generations. I didn't include everyone here. But his son David married a lady named Margaret Davis. This Margaret Davis I had already been researching in another one of my trees. which was for another one of my 7 times great-grandfather's friends. And then when you get to their children, their daughter Anne also married into this same family that I was researching Margaret in. And then the brother James, he was married to a lady in my Walters family tree. And then Joshua was married to a lady from another one of my family trees. So I just kept finding these connections into different parts of my family tree. And then the question that I ask once I find all of these connections is, what made this family so good to marry into? Because my ancestors seem to be doing it quite a lot. I think that's a really important question because then it gives you reasons to research other families that you may not be researching. The really good thing about this particular family is that they were important members of the chapel that my ancestors attended. And so if they're marrying into this family who was an important member of that chapel, who are the other important families? And did my ancestors marry into those? And perhaps if I research them enough, then I'll end up finding the answer to my brick wall question. Kathy here says, my great-great-grandfather, his wife came from Germany in 1864. Unfortunately, since I don't speak or read German, I'm kind of stuck there again. That is a thing that comes up a lot in Welsh research too, because a lot of the main records that people use are in English, but then when you get to things like the journals and the newspaper, a lot of them are in Welsh. And the thing that I would say is learn the words in German for all of the family relationships and then read the articles, looking for those specific words, and also looking for the specific words like proper nouns, so like people's names and place names. That's what I would do, and then you just go about like picking it up. That's how I learned how to read Welsh for genealogy. I'm certainly not fluent in Welsh. I can barely make a sentence, but I can read through an article and pick out all of the important words and process it for the purpose of doing my family history research. The next thing is place. Place in Welsh genealogy research is the most important. If you don't know what parish your ancestor was from, you need to find out. And you need to like commit that to memory, because so many of the records that you need to find are going to mention these places. So yeah, the other thing is like their farm name or the address. The really lovely thing about Welsh research is that the name of people's farms, especially if they were like the farming class and landowning class, like their farm name is going to be mentioned all the time, wherever they can. I even had one of the brothers of my 4 times great-grandmother, he went all the way to England, to London, in England, obviously. But he went all the way to London, and whoever it was who was present to fill out the census, they didn't know where in Wales he was from. They only knew his specific farm name, which was really great help for me. So like if he was present himself, he would have said, hey, I'm from this specific farm, and just said the name, or he had told whoever it was who like was there for the enumerator or filled out the sheet. Like they would have known because he would have talked about it. So, we'll go back to this Descendants of Olwen. The reason that I found this particular obituary is that I was just searching for the name of their farm. I didn't care who came up in association with it. I didn't care whose obituary it was. As long as they mentioned this farm name, it was going into my saved folders, and I was going to go through it and figure out how they connect to my people. And sometimes you find these like really obscure mentions that may not break down a brick wall, but they might add some really interesting history or information about your ancestor. So I found this in a book from, it was Richard Fenton's 1804 Tour of Wales. So this rich guy went on a tour of Wales in 1804, and he actually stopped by Olwen Farm because there was an ancient fort there. And so he talked to a farmer, an old, intelligent man, and who said he could get no material intelligence to ascertain its history or date. This old farmer said he had found a quernstone there, and that there was a tradition that Olwen, whose name the place bears, was a most celebrated beauty, daughter of a prince of North Wales, and was carried off by a prince of South Wales, pursued to that spot where a great battle was fought. He went on to tell him other things. But in 1804, when he spoke to this man, my 7 times great-grandfather was he was 75 and lived at Olwen. So there's a good chance that this is him, which is really, really exciting because I know this like really obscure thing that happened to my ancestor. And you can also see like how other people perceived him, an old, intelligent man. That's pretty cool as well. So the next thing about place is knowing the parish, and then after the parish level, the union level, I think, is the most important. Normally, most people would go from parish. So if we zoom in here, Casan here, which is about this size. Hopefully you're able to see my my cursor. That's a parish. And then the union boundary is what's highlighted in red. Union boundaries, I talked about them in a previous video, but in Wales, and I think in England as well, the union boundaries were the boundaries that were kind of the center of it was the market town. So in this case is Lampeter. And in this union, all of the services that they were getting, like education, like healthcare, were coming from Lampeter. And they were also going from wherever they lived in this area to the market town to go and buy things. And so you might not find information about whatever ancestor living in Llanwenog over here, but you might find that they're mentioned in records in association with Lampeter. That's also kind of true just in the fact that Lampeter is the bigger place, so it's going to draw the eyes of like historians and the antiquarians and stuff. But the thing about union boundaries is that they don't follow the county boundaries. And I do not think that county boundaries are very important in the daily lives of the people that we're researching. Because everyone here in Pencarreg, which I research a lot, people here, they were constantly crossing over and going to Lampeter or going up all through Cardiganshire, always crossing this boundary. And there might have been like a toll gate there or something, but other than that, this county boundary that goes along here didn't really stop them and wasn't really like socially significant in the way that I've found parish boundaries and union boundaries to be. And even if you don't have Welsh ancestors, like figuring out what the socially important boundaries are is going to be like super important for you. The other thing about the parish level and researching parishes for brick walls is that as soon as I run out of records or searches that give me new records, I just sit down and I read all of the records created in a certain parish. So in this like union boundary, I've read, maybe less so in the south bit, I've read all of the wills ever created in those parishes from 1600 to 1858. Not everyone has that much time, which is okay, but I really enjoy doing it. And when you do that, you end up stumbling upon mentions of your ancestors. Because for a lot of records, there will be a bunch of people mentioned in them, but they're not indexed in a way that you can actually search for that. So the only way you can do it is by just sitting down and reading all the records. But yeah, start with the parish level, which is going to be the smallest geographic unit, and then go to the union level. Don't start big and overwhelm yourself. Start small and have a handle of it. The next is important places. So this is a picture of Cilgwyn Chapel in Llangybi. Oh, we can show you on the map. It's about right here. My ancestors loved this place and were members of this place for many, many generations. One of my upcoming videos is talking in depth about like doing a place study and what the significance of nonconformist chapels. But what I'll say here is that if you treat doing research on a chapel as like a chapel study or a place study, instead of just like looking for individual mentions of your ancestors, individual mentions of your ancestors in the records, like really interesting things can happen. So this is just, we're not going to zoom in, but this is a skeleton view of the family tree of my 6 times great-grandfather, who is here. Before I did a place study of Cilgwyn Chapel, this is about as much as I knew about him, his sister, his niece, and 4 of his children. I ended up finding, after much hard work and looking through page by page, thousands of pages of parish register, or sorry, not parish register, but the chapel baptism book, which was very difficult to find. This is what happened to my family tree. I found all of these people. And the thing about chapels is that I was writing this morning, so it's on my mind. But the thing about chapels is that it's hard to find the records for a lot of them. What you normally find on the genealogy websites is the parish register, which is done through the Church of England, which each parish in Wales has its Church of England church at the center. But then it might have like 5 different nonconformist chapels, and no one was really regulating the record keeping for a lot of those chapels, and for like a long time at least. And so a lot of them didn't end up getting to the archives, and even fewer of them made it into the digitization projects. So it's hard to find them. And then the thing with using a transcription, which is what I had access to, I didn't have access to images of the original record. I just had a transcript. They didn't record any of the place names, which is the #1 most useful thing in Welsh research, because everyone's named John Jones and Mary Davis and Thomas Thomas, and it's hard to differentiate people just by their name. So I ended up taking this entire chapel baptism booklet and turning all, like, it was like 564 or something baptisms. I turned them all into family trees. For every single person. I had the child's name and their dates, and then their parents' names. Then I combined as many as I could into like larger family units. And what became apparent in doing this is that they were using the old style of Welsh names. So instead of my 6 times great grandparents being listed as David Davis and Anne Davis, they were listed as David John David and Anne David Thomas. And so, like, focusing in on these on like a chapel study or a place study, even when your normal ways of doing research fail you, you'll be able to see the kind of like internal logic of the particular record that you're looking at. And the logic of this record was that people were being named with these old names and listing, oh, sorry, old Welsh names are like David John David. David is his name, John is his father's name, David is his grandfather's name. Same for Anne David Thomas. Anne was her name, David was her father's name, Thomas was her grandfather's name, which I haven't confirmed that Thomas yet, but he's one of my brick walls. And so by looking at all of these people with these really long names, I was able to uh, figure out the patterns and find David John David's sister, Anne John David, and finding all of the children who were like Margaret David John David and Mary David John David. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was just specifically looking for individual of my ancestors. It had to have happened through this place study. The last thing is a name study. So what that might be is you want to find your ancestor, David Morgan, in a certain parish, and you just go and research all of the Morgans ever to be in that parish. That's a good way to do it, looking for people who might be his relative. Or you look for everyone named Deborah in a parish, which I've actually done with Deborah and Maud, just looking for those names and seeing if they're related. Or maybe you have an ancestor, John Jones, and he's from this one parish and you really want to find him but can't figure out which John Jones is the right John Jones. Just research all of the John Joneses and see who ends up being your ancestor and see if any of the other ones are connected in some way. Because eventually you'll find different ways to identify these people, even if they do have the same name. Hopefully you can tell from how I talk about brick walls is that I like to take the focus off of your specific ancestor and searching that for that specific ancestor and basically like bashing your head against the wall, looking for that one ancestor, and look at people around them, look at places around them, look at what's going around them, and hoping that you will stumble upon references to them or something will click and then you go, oh, this is so-and-so's sister. So yeah, that's kind of how I handle brick walls. Martha here says, I wonder from Australia about relatives in Wales. My grandfather says his grandfather was a stout man with a Welsh accent, but too hard to do the genealogy and no kids. Yeah, the no kids thing is difficult. When they don't have any siblings to research, when I'm looking at my brick walls and I'm just not finding like anything in relation to them, I'm just like, didn't you have siblings? Like, what is going on? Why don't you have any friends, ancestor? Why weren't you hanging out with people? Why weren't you witnessing things? Yeah, the thing with crossing the ocean with people who migrated is that you need to find a specific place. I was talking to one of my friends who's also a genealogist the other day, and like you kind of have to do the Australian research, or if you're in the States, the US research first to find a specific place being mentioned on a travel document or something. And then with that specific place, ideally it being like of the parish level or a nearby large town or a specific farm. Like those are the best, because really you can't just have their name and go they were from Wales and then have success in doing the research on the Wales side. It's tough, but that's kind of your best way to go about it. Ain't that a kick in the head, says Shemai Cymru here, Da Yawn T. Your videos are great. Keep it up. I'm glad you're enjoying. Thanks for the encouragement. And Martha, you say children go every which way when their parents die. Yeah. Yeah, and that one's tricky as well, is when everyone kind of splits up. But you know, I was just talking about this the other day too. My so if we go back to the my carpenters, click back. My carpenters and my blacksmiths. This Griffith Morgan. Oh, there we go. Griffith Morgan, Mary. They had a sister Elizabeth and a brother Charles. Mary stayed in the village that they were born. Griffith went off to a different parish nearby. Elizabeth stayed in the parish that they were born in, and then Charles, he went to a like a factory mining town that was quite a distance in like Welsh terms. Um, the really great thing about them is that even though they went all of these different directions, you find Mary's children mentioned in Griffith's will, and you have Elizabeth's children showing up at Charles's funeral, which is mentioned in the newspaper. And then when Griffith passed away, they all of the siblings passed away in like their 90s. There was a newspaper article saying, "Oh, there were all these siblings. They passed away really elderly. Here's all their names." And so like even if they do go in different directions, it's really important to look at some of the ways that they might have still kept in touch. I mean, I was looking at the other day, I was looking at a set of letters written by, yeah, it was written by Reverend Timothy Richards, who was a Baptist missionary in China in like the late 1800s. And him and his wife were writing back to his mother all the time. So there was a set of like 56 letters written to his mother back in Wales. Um, so like try to look for those moments where, especially like important life events, where they might have gotten back together. And might I add, your pronunciations are spot on as far as I've seen. How do you find the double L? Sorry, a little off topic, but very important. Um, yeah, it's a big thing in like Welsh speaking communities. Your pronunciation, people get very um, opinionated, we'll say. Um, the thing for a lot of people who have Welsh ancestors or Welsh family, but didn't grow up in Wales, is that some people don't have a lot of experience with Welsh words and Welsh language. I was lucky that I grew up saying like place names. My grampy grew up in Llangefellach. My mouth is super dry. Um, he grew up in Llangefellach. Um, he was born in Cymru. So like these kind of words were just ones that we said all the time. The dog doesn't go to kennel, the dog goes cwtch. So like there are words that I grew up saying, and also I think people overestimate how difficult Welsh is as a language and pronouncing it. Sometimes even English is difficult. Um, and I think that's just part of like kind of like an old outdated prejudice, I think. has something to do with it, and just how on the internet especially Welsh is kind of turned into a meme. It's very, very much memed. Look at this long word and how unpronounceable it is, and people on the internet saying about how Welsh is just strings of consonants and it's incomprehensible and stuff. But I've noticed that that's how you can tell people who've never actually looked at Welsh or tried to speak Welsh, because the consonants are not difficult, the vowels are difficult. That's where I have the most trouble, because the vowels, depending where they are in the word, change how they sound sometimes, but the consonants are always the same. So yeah, I guess we'll end on talking about Welsh language. Does anyone else have any thoughts about brick walls or anything? I'll flick back to the chart, to the finished chart. Yeah, I just wanted to do this because I wanted to talk about brick walls, and I just think that calling them, how we talk about them as brick walls and like obstacles, really it distracts us from how they are opportunities to do really interesting research about things that aren't necessarily our direct ancestors, but that will give us answers to the questions that we have about our direct ancestors. So I wanted to highlight that today. I hope you all enjoyed, and thanks for watching. If you want more people to hear about Welsh genealogy and history, definitely leave a like, because it does hurt. Or it does help, sorry. It does not hurt. It helps to leave a comment, and it helps to leave a like. Yeah, because that's when YouTube knows to push the videos in the algorithm. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.